Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be showing you an IFR workflow for the G1000. Now the reason we're putting this video together as all one feature is to kind of show you sort of the things that I do and how I do them, so that when you're approaching your own use of the G1000 you can kind of see the way I sort of cheat the system. I've also selected an IFR route that's going to be relatively challenging for us because there's going to be a lot of different little things we're going to have to get right along the way, and that'll make it easier for you to understand how you can set the G1000 up in such a way that makes it easy for you too. So first off, we're sitting here on the ground at a good speed airport. This is 42 Bravo in Connecticut. We're at 1,000 revolutions per minute, and of course, we have ourselves nice and low on the mixture there to kind of conserve it. In the real world, a lot of the stuff that we'd be doing today, we'd probably be setting up on our tablet and then exporting it onto the G1000. The G1000 is a Bluetooth device, believe it or not. Or of course, we could stick it on one of these little flashcards and write everything out on our computer kind of a thing and stick it in that way. So a lot of kind of the work here is kind of in setting those up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the flight plan we're going to be taking. And like I said, it's a little convoluted, but the reason I chose it that way is just to make things a little bit more interesting for us and make us earn it, so to speak. So our route today, of course, is going to be taking us out of here. We're going to go up the Connecticut River. We're going to get to Hartford. From Hartford, we're going to go to Devaney. From Devaney, we're going to swing up here along the Victor 405 up to Whitney. And we're going to come over here to Kibbe. And of course, along there, we're going to hit Barnes itself. Now, the weather today, we have real world weather, by the way. It just snowed. We have ourselves wind is coming out of 230, which means we're going to be taking the ILS for 20 today to get down to the ground. Now, this is a pretty fun one for us because it's going to require us to fly a procedure turn. So we've got all the nasty IFR like 101 stuff here that we're going to have to figure out how to get in the G1000 system so that we don't have to really stress about it. We can just concentrate on, flying the plane. Let me do something real quick while I'm thinking about it. There we go. So first things first is I'm going to go ahead and get all of my waypoints set up. Now the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to float down here like this. I'm going to go ahead and open up my flight plan page. It's going to be the big wheel. I'm going to go ahead and twist that a few times until I get to the FIPL page. And now I'm going to go ahead and dial in my flight plan details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to right click on this, and then I'm going to use my big one to get to the first line right there. Looks good. And all I'm going to do is put in my origin. So in this case, like I said, we're going to do 42 Bravo today. Go ahead and shut that button off when you're done. Press enter. Looks good to me. Runway, probably going to be taking a 1-4 is kind of lame. Yeah, we'll take 1-4 today. Why not? Because of reasons. Enter to accept. Delightful. So now I'm going to come down here to en route, and we're just going to dial in each one of our waypoints one at a time to make it nice and easy for us. So let's see. We're going to be doing HFD first. Hotel Foxtrot Delta, just like that. Press enter. It's going to say, did you mean Airport Mexico? No. I wanted Northeast United States. Looks good to me. Next, we're going to do Devaney. So I'm just going to come in here and wiggle the little one. We're going to do DVANY. Oops, sorry. I hope we do that correctly here. Actually, I was right the first time. ANY. Fantastic. I'm going to shut that sucker off. Press enter, enter. Looks good to me. We're going to scroll down to the next location here. This is going to be our next spot. Let's see here. We're going from Devaney to Whitney, WITNY. Whiskey, India, Tango, November, Yankee, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and close that on off as well. Looks good to me. We're going to go down to the next page, just like that. We're going to deal with feet in just a moment. And of course, Kibbe is going to be our last one. It's a little goofy doing Kibbe this way, but I'll deal with it. Usually Kibbe, we'd be at a much higher altitude than we're going to be today, but that's okay. It's just a demonstration. Of course, if I come here and I zoom out just a little bit, I can confirm visually that that flight plan looks good. If the screen is too hard to read, you can always go to your options here, and you can basically clear your way through it. This is pretty good for the way that I need it, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. All right, we're going to go down to destination now. I'm going to go ahead and dial this in directly. We're going to be dialing, like I said, we're going to do Kilo Bravo Alaska Foxtrot. It's a delightful Barnes Air Force Base. Enter, enter. Actually, we do want to select a specific runway. My apologies. We can just come down here, and if we ever need to fix it, we can just wiggle the little one again, and now we can just set the runway. It's going to be 20 today, so I'm just going to press 20. Looks good to me. And let's just visually confirm that looks okay. All right, looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good. Perfect. And that's all in great shape. So one things we could do here is you'll notice there's an option for altitude if you want to dial in a specific altitude. We're technically traveling west today, and I want to get out of that cloud coverage. The problem is our flight's pretty short. You can see here our total distance is not that great. Basically 12, so 40, 50, yeah, about 60. Yeah, we could do 6,000 feet. Probably do 4,000, but that's going to bury us basically in the clouds. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to come in here, give this thing a little wiggle, and you can see we can adjust our altitude. So obviously we can come up here, make this a 6, just like that. We're going to go down here like this, and all we're going to do is pull the button out. And again, if you do not press enter, it will not save. So again, I'll switch the altitude I want. I'm going to do 6,000 here, just like that. I'm going to press the enter key. Is this correct? I just press enter like that. So now if we wanted to do Devaney here, we could dial that one as the same way. Again, we're just going to come in here 6,000 feet. Remember, vertical navigation only works down, so that's okay for us. Press enter. Looks good to me. I like that. We're going to come down to Whitney. Whitney, of course, we're going to leave ourselves up at 6,000. We're not going to start descending until we get to Kibbe, and then we're going to drop down to kind of that initial altitude that we're going to need. Cool. Let's go over to Kibbe now. I'm going to go down to our current altitude. Let's see here. According to our ILS, we need to be between 4,700 and 3,500. So it sounds to me like 4,000 is got to be the way to go here. So I'm just going to dial in 4,000 feet. Enter. Delightful. So we're going to take off. We're going to climb up to 6,000 feet. We're going to descend down to 4,000 when we get to Kibbe. We'll use vertical navigation to help us out with that. When we get to our destination, of course, we're going to be hitting up a runway 20 there. And a runway, I like how they give us a little weather down here. It's not quite what it is in the real world, but it'll probably update by the time we get to it, so I'm not worried about it. So this flight plan looks really, really good. In the real world, what you'd want to do is you'd want to open this up, run down here, and go ahead and save this so we don't run into a problem. So like I said, good idea to save these kinds of things, but it's pretty good. Go over here and pull that knob out. I'm pretty satisfied. Everything's exactly where I need it to be. We could, of course, decide a feet per minute. Actually, we'll do that while we're here. Let me just come run down here real fast. No, we'll leave it at 3 degrees. That's fine. I'm not even going to change it. So our flight plan is pretty much good to go. So what we want to do now is we want to kind of migrate over here. And of course, what we want to do here is dial in our initial altitude, which for us is going to be 6,000 feet. So I'm going to come up here and dial this into 6,000. Again, keep it pretty simple here. That looks good to me. That looks good. I'm just checking to make sure that looks okay. And then, of course, we need a way to get to our thing. And you can see right now, it's expecting us to go right from runway 14 to Hartford, which is fine. That's a perfectly good leg for us to climb on. So that's all set. Of course, many of you are sitting here going, is this the time when I can enable VNAV? First of all, we can enable the flight director. That can be done at any time. You'll notice it's on roll and pitch mode. It's got a else was basically waiting for it. And of course, you want to press VNAV, but remember, VNAV is down, not up. So you can push that button all you want. It's nothing's going to happen. So again, don't stress out about that. So we're all set as far as those goes. Like I said, we've got that pretty set. Displays. I'm not going to be changing any of this stuff that's in this page. I will be hitting over here though to my map options. Actually, let's go ahead and take things a little bit further here, just as a demonstration. I'm going to head over to my waypoint page here. One of the really cool things you can do here is you can actually tell this thing an interesting waypoint, and you can actually get information about it. For example, if I did 42 Bravo and always remember to shut it off first, you can actually come in here and read details about this airport directly, which is really, really cool stuff. And it's going to give you that extra little bit of information you need, like taxiways and things. And you can see, for example, that I'm chilling up here and I'm going to be taking off kind of in that direction today. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of visualize what's going on. You can actually leave this up as you taxi and you can watch yourself take the taxi path. It's just kind of a neat thing. So next what we'll be doing, of course, is we'll be setting up our different frequencies. We have a lot of frequencies to set up today, so we want to kind of get that all squared away right away. So first one I'm going to be interested in, of course, is going to be the ILS that we're going to be using. And you're saying, it's kind of a long time before we're going to use that. Why are we going to use it now? The reason I'd like to is just to have it ready to go. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to do 111.90, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the standby position here. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to come over here, and I'm actually going to pull this out so it switches to my other nav. Now, there's 2 other frequencies we're going to be interested in today. The first one's going to be Hartford VOR, which is 114.90. If you're wondering where I'm getting these numbers, by the way, let me go ahead and open that up on the big screen so you can kind of see exactly what we have here. You can see the first one's 114.90. And the other one we're going to be interested in too, which is going to be important for us later, because if we have to go around, for example, or we have to run misapproach, we need to know the frequency. And that's a 113.0. That's going to work pretty well for us as far as getting that set up. So I'm just going to come up here right away. I'm just going to dial that in. Let's flip 114.90 first. And let's get 113 ready to go. And perfect. Everything's ready to rock for us. We could actually test that. I don't think we're close enough. Yeah, I was going to say we don't have line of sight, so we're not going to be able to see it. The other thing I like to do too, when I'm, again, preparing for this, just checking to make sure all that stuff works, I'm going to go ahead and pull this out one more time, get us ready for that. And so one of the cool things that we have the ability to do is basically adjust this display. And one of the things I like to do is I like to make sure I'm on option 1 for 3 rather for wind. You can shut it off if it bothers you. But more importantly, you have the ability to turn bearings on. Now, what I like to do is actually like to use this bearing tool for the purposes of monitoring navigation 2. You can actually see very closely here that on Nav 2, we're at Hartford and we're at a distance of 12.3 nautical miles. Now that's pretty good stuff. That makes our lives a lot easier. I'm going to go ahead and make a little barometric pressure adaptation there. Looks good. I'm not going to bother with this. You can shut off synthetic vision if it bothers you. We have this nice little pathway mode that we're going to get to see today when we're kind of get up a little bit higher in the air. All right, that's all set and good to go. We don't need timers or anything like that. Transponder's already running. I'm not going to change the CDI. Everything else is good. What a lot of people will do is they'll put on a little mini display here. The disadvantage to this mini display, of course, is it gets kind of complicated. So a lot of people, especially the more modern version of the G1000 software, you can actually integrate it right into here. You just have to kind of be careful though, because that's a little complex. So a lot of people will actually shut off topo and they'll just turn traffic on. And traffic's handy, of course, if we're in a situation where we're going to be in that. You could also turn on relative terrain, so you can actually see where the nasty stuff is. So it creates a nice little contrast with your standard little map that's on this side to make it easier to kind of spot both different things flying towards you as well as nasty terrain. Like this is kind of the emergency. This is kind of where we are. Of course, if you need to adjust the range, you can just come here and give us a little twist. You can see that I'm pretty far away, but again, it's a pretty good view of everything that's around us. It is a little cluttered, and if it is too cluttered, remember you can always turn modes off, or you can put it on inset mode. But realistically, I find this the most useful, especially when we're doing like an instrument approach or something like that. All right, go ahead and close it out. Looks pretty good. Lastly, what I want to do before we get rolling here, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to this page. Actually, go ahead and pull that out. Come back to this page here. Come here, of course, if we wanted weather radar information, this would be a good idea. You can see we don't have a weather radar on here. We would get NextRad. We'd basically download that weather. But if you need to, you can actually come over here and flip it on just like that. And that'll make your life a little bit simpler if you're running into any nasty weather. And again, it's still snowing to the north of us, so I wouldn't be surprised if we'd run into a little bit today. Cool. Well, let's go. I'm going to go ahead and release the parking brake. And of course, we have to get ourselves all the way down to runway 14. Keep in mind, in the real world right now, this place would be very, very thoroughly covered in all sorts of nasty snow and stuff like that. We don't see any of that snow. I'll go ahead and hit the mixture there. Give it a little bit. There we go. On the way. All right. One last idiot check for all of our switches. We got our mixture set correctly. We're on the correct fuel tank. We've got the appropriate lights that we need turned on here. Stop it from yelling at us. And it's just a matter of rolling this thing out. Now, one of the fun things we could do is we could actually specifically dial in our desired like climb angle and stuff. Again, you wouldn't do this while you're flying down the end of the runway here, but in the event that you were, you could, of course, dial those things in like we showed you last time. This is such a short runway in the real world. I mean, it doesn't look bad to you folks watching at home, but man, when you're doing this in the real world, you're ready for trouble. There we go. Airborne. Gonna just clear those trees. And you can also watch as that display turn very red on us. A little bit of turbulence over the top of the trees. Nothing new there. All right. Do a nice turn to the right. Awesome. So keep in mind in the real world, if we were flying instruments, we would have done is gotten IFR clearance and all that other good stuff. I'm not going to stress about that too much at this point because, like I said, we're just doing kind of a general workflow video so you can kind of be familiar with what's going on and kind of how it applies. One of the things you'll notice now is in the bottom center of my display, the fact that everything's turning yellow, which means we're progressively getting safer and safer here and making it a little bit less likely to be bumping into anything that's nasty. One of the things you'll also notice is if you look up in the top left corner, you'll notice on the G1000 display, we now have a visual path, so we can actually see where we need to go. So not only do we have the traditional kind of, just doing our thing, but we can actually look out the window or look down at our display and know where we need to be. It's kind of handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap on the autopilot. Of course, we have really bad turbulence. We're having a known issue in Flight Sim 2024 for turbulence these days. That's okay. And any time, of course, I can come down here and flip on the navigation hold. Now let's take a look at the different things we've got going on here. One of the things you'll observe we're on GPS mode, which means the GPS is providing us with roll information. The autopilot is selected, and we are on pitch hold. This aircraft is presently trying to hold a specific pitch, in which case it is the pitch that we dialed in just a few moments ago. You can actually see that visibly right here. Now, one of the things we can do is if we need a more aggressive climb here, we can actually come over here and go to flight level change. And as soon as we do that, you'll notice that we have the speed here that says 88 knots. Now, let's say we want to go ahead and make it so that it's more aggressive. We want to do a pure maximum VY climb. I can come up here and set the nose up until this gets up to 75 knots, which is also lining up with our little VY here, which is going to be getting us on our way up very, very aggressively here. So we're going to be scooting up into the top of our climb here. You can see we're just about there, and it's actually kind of nice because you can see that highway in the sky very, very, very clearly here. And again, right there, that little kind of magenta boxes that you're seeing now, represents our new path that we're actually going to be taking to get to our destination. And again, real world weather today, so we've got a bit of a crosswind there. It's actually pretty typical for this time of year. And I'm just looking out the window going, oh boy, I hope I have the pitot heating system on. That could be a real problem for us otherwise. But you can have an idea of just how aggressive that really, really is. So now that we're up at the cruise phase, we can start getting ready for everything else that we need to do. If you remember from before, we did set up some VNAV, so we can get that squared away. We can also get our engine squared away. That's actually going to be the first thing I want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce my cruise power here, about 2,500 RPM, which is going to be pretty good for us. It's not too fast, not too slow. Again, we don't need to go ripping. We're going to be there like in 5 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to the engine page, click on the lean page. And of course what we can do now is if we start fiddling with our mixture, you can see I'm pulling my mixture back there, you can actually watch as the exhaust gas temperature changes. And we're looking for basically it's a peak. You can also see my RPM is spiked quite nicely. Oh, there we go. Too far, too far, too far. Let's see here. Peak temperature today is going to be about 1550. I think that's about right. And again, you have to kind of play the game. 1550. Oh, going up, going up. Could you put this on assist mode also if you desire? Yeah, it looks like about 1,570 is going to be peak there. So we're going to enrich and pass peak there just a little bit. And delightful. Everything's all set to go. Sweet. So that's all good. That's exactly the way that I want it. Engine's nice and leaned out. We can actually pull back the throttle just a tiny bit here. And again, you don't have to go too hard on that. And now, of course, if I look out my window, not so good on that side, but that's all right. But you can see we are starting to now travel through these little highways in the sky to get ourselves to our destination. So now it's a good time to go ahead and get VNAV all set up. So what I want to do now is, we got some weather. There's some weather. I don't want to fly into it. And so the way we're going to get this set up is all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at our handy-dandy flight plan real quick. Now, right now, 6,000 feet is selected, and 6,000 feet is what we've got. So if I come down here, for example, and I reduce this down to, let's say, 4,000 feet, click, click, you'll notice that all it does is takes my highway in the sky and it lowers it down here. And of course, that doesn't do much for me on account of the fact that we haven't triggered the waypoint that needs to get that 4,000 foot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to skip the trip a little bit here and get closer to that 4,000 foot spot. All right, we're just crossing to Vanny here, and as you can see, something new has appeared. It's this little box up here that says 6,000. The other thing you'll notice is like my blue box that says 6,000. Now you're sitting here going, wait, what is all that supposed to be? And the reality is this guy over here is actually your new VNAV selected altitude, and this guy over here is your currently allowed altitude. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to intentionally reduce my altitude here, and you notice my sky did not change this time. And the reason, of course, it did that is because now VNAV has got its fingers in the pie, so to speak. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over and hit the VPath button. And what you'll observe is that VPath has now been orange. This means that this aircraft now has the ability to actually descend to the desired altitudes here. It won't actually start that process until we get to Kibbe, of course, and then it'll start making its way back down. You'll see here, right as I approach Whitney, the altitude has now changed. You'll now see that it says 4,000, and now it also has 4,000. The one thing you'll notice, though, is if you look up at the tippy top here where it says altitude mode, the altitude mode is presently set to 6,000 feet. So no matter what you're seeing over here as far as what's recommended based on VPath or what's recommended based on what you squiggled over here, it is still locked onto this because this is the current active autopilot mode that you're currently journeying on. So what we're going to get here in a few moments here is everything is going to start switching just like that to VPath. When you switch to VPath mode, the aircraft is now responsible for your descent. As a matter of fact, if you look carefully at the highway in the sky, you'll notice the highway in the sky is descending on its own, which now means you need to go reach over to your throttle and you need to start pulling that thing back a little bit. You need to go ahead and make sure you reset your mixture for whatever you need it is to get yourself back down. Not English, I know. I haven't actually looked outside in a while. It's not terrible. It's definitely IFR conditions, though. So you can see now we're starting our left turn, and we're going to start making our way directly towards Kibbe, and then, of course, we're going to heading to Barnes. Now is a good time, of course, to get our procedures all set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to the proc button. The proc button allows you to select what approach you'd like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and press select approach. It's going to say, did you want ILS for 2.0? Because, of course, it's going to want ILS for 2.0. That's the one that we picked before. It's going to say, would you like to do it by vectors? Would you like to do it by BAF? Would you like to do CTR, Gardner, or Leads? Now, we're going to be using BAF. The reason we're choosing BAF here is because you looked really, really carefully earlier. You probably observed that BAF is the VOR that is located right where we need to be. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to fly here, do a procedure turn, and then come down for our ILS landing. We got to kind of earn it today. Haven't done any of that in a while. It's all good, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to BAF. I'm going to go ahead and press the Enter key. It's going to say, would you like minimums today? Of course, you can come in here and say barometric minimums. And we can come over to this little knob here. We can actually dial in our barometric minimums here. Now, the nice thing is we can get those right off a chart here. So let's see, barometric for us, ILS approach, 520 feet. Nice and easy, 520. Again, this is barometric minimums. This isn't radar minimums, 520. Delightful. You just come over here and press enter. It's going to say, would you like to go ahead and load this, or would you like to go ahead and activate this? Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that its primary frequency is 111.90. Oh, you can see it's already up there. The reason it'll actually switch over on its own, which is actually pretty cool, but I like to be in charge of that, which is one of the reasons why I put all my VORs in NAV2, and I leave all of my ILSs in NAV1 for this kind of a flight. I'm going to say load. It's going to yell at me saying, are you sure it's GPS monitor only? I press go. Nothing bad happens. And again, the reason nothing bad happens here is because right now we're under control of the VNAV. We've still got Kibbe selected. We haven't actually activated our approach. We don't have to hit our approach until we basically cross Kibbe, and then we can activate the approach and get going. Keep in mind, in the real world, air traffic control is going to be vectoring you everywhere, so you never know what you're actually going to get. Now, one of the cool things you'll notice here is right as we're getting to our desired waypoint Kibbe, we are just hitting 4,000 feet, which is awesome. Now what we're ready to do is to get the approach actually fired up and begin our process with that, which makes it pretty easy for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here back to the proc button here. It's going to say, are you ready? I'm going to say, yeah, I'm ready. So I'm going to come down here to where it says activate approach. I'm going to press the enter key. Now what you'll notice is because we did everything so carefully today, it is just highlighting everything in pink and basically getting us going down towards the ground, which is exactly what we want. Now if I swing over here to our other display, I can actually pull ourselves out of this real quick. We're going to pull that out so we don't need to take a look at it. There we go. You can see that BAF is now our new selected waypoint, which is exactly what we expected. Now, one of the things I would do with this normally is if you grab onto the stick and move it around, you'll notice it gives you the ability to wiggle it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and right click on this and I'm going to wiggle this. Do you see the little arrow that's chilling on the screen right now? I can now hold my arrow and go to the top of the screen and move everything out of the way. So if you actually look here with my handy dandy arrow, and again, you can see where it is right here, is you can actually see that the procedure turn is built into the specific procedure. And that makes our life a lot easier. Of course, we have to go all the way out to Leeds to turn around. Oof, that's a lot of work. The nice thing is if you are fiddling with the pan tool, you can always come over here and just give that a quick little right click and kind of get us going again back to the normal view. So you have a pretty good idea of, again, situational awareness here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward to we're just about Barnes there. All right, we're just about Barnes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get ready for the ILS approach. So let's go ahead and pop this sucker open again. I'll take a look at what we've got going on. We're right about to go ahead and cross this right here. We're going to be scooting along this one. Of course, our out direction is going to be, let's see here, 24 degrees. Our in is going to be 204 degrees. We need to be crossing Wessie at about 2,200 feet, which is going to be kind of our new destination altitude there. Unfortunately, our procedure turn there, the holding pattern is between 35 and 47. We need to be 2200 to cross Wessie. So we'll go ahead and get ready for that. So I'm going to come down here, go ahead and dial in 220. You'll notice VPath has been highlighted. It is expecting a VPath. There is no VPath here. Unfortunately, we're on our own as far as that goes now. So one of the things we can do, of course, is we can come in here at any point and we can basically override the mode. You can see where it says VPath. If I push this again, do you see how it disappeared? But now what we can do is we can dial in a quick little flick and basically adjust our descent rate how we want. The other thing we could do too is we could press vertical speed. We can get ourselves 500 feet per minute, which is going to be plenty to get us down to the ground very comfortably. This is a great time, of course, to take a look at our navigational display, and you can see just how nasty. Ew! I was wondering when I was going to get to the actual weather. You can see just how nasty the actual weather is here, which is just kind of fun for us. So things don't get interesting again until we get right around the point where we have to turn around. There we are. Time to make our procedure turn. So our procedure turn conveniently is handled completely automatically. And you can see it automatically picked the correct type of procedure turn. But the thing of the procedure turn that gets interesting is when we start coming out of this part of the curve right here. One of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be shifting from GPS navigation, which is what we've been using this whole time, over to ILS, which is what's going to be getting us down onto the ground. That's one of those things we have to kind of just be mindful of. One of the things I notice here is I'm getting a lot of the NextRad data, which is making it a little difficult to see. And again, we can always go back to and adjust it any way which we want. Let's see here, map, HSI, NextRad. Again, I thought I shut that off. Relative terrain. It's just safe terrain around us. And again, I can shut that down. But again, there's just a lot of mountains in this region, which is why it's kind of blasting us like that. So it looks good to me. We're pretty solid. Again, this aircraft does a really nice job of making that turn on its own. Just kind of a neat little thing that it does. Man, we've cooked through a lot of gas here. This has been one more of a flight than I expected. Part of the fun, as I like to say. Part of the fun. So what we're going to do is we'll catch you right here. And now it is time for the fun part, the ILS approach. So one of the important things we have to do is we have to make sure that this autopilot automatically switches itself over to the ILS before we basically get too carried away in this turn here. One of the things I'll do is I'll zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see. Now at any point we can switch over to the ILS, and one of the things we want to confirm is if you look up top here that we're on the correct frequency, and you can see we are not on the correct frequency. This is one of the things we're looking out for. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that on, pop it over. 111.9 is IBAF. That's exactly the one we want to be on. We're just going to straighten out here, and of course we'll begin our approach once we get there. So we're at 2,200 feet right now. The aircraft is going to be kind of spinning around. Again, I like the difference between the real world weather and this one. It's expecting a hold. We didn't fly that hold. And you'll notice we now have two different sets of markers. We have the one that is coming from our ILS, and we, of course, also have the one that is going to be coming from our original GPS, kind of that highway in the sky. So when you see both sets of these at the same time, do not despair. You're perfectly fine. We're doing great here. We're doing fine. Can't see so hot, but you can see way off in the distance. That is our destination. Everything has been pre-programmed and ready to go. It's really just a matter of flying the rest of our ILS approach here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very, very, very carefully shut some modes off here to make sure it has a nice smooth transition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off my nav. You can see it goes to roll mode. I'm going to change my CDI to localizer, and then I'm going to engage APR, which is approach hold mode. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is a couple things happen. First of all, glide slope is now pre-selected. It's expecting us to see a glide slope, which we're going to be acquiring in a second. You can see them a little below it. And of course, we've got the localizer itself, which is being represented by this little white display here. Now, let's go ahead and use some magic here to get us a little bit closer, just for purposes of watching that moment. Now, one of the cool things is you'll see how that highway in the sky is doing its little happy dance there, trying to figure out exactly what it needs to do. It is going to all come together in a few seconds here once we get a little bit closer. Again, we're in F16 mode. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to make sure I've got that correct. There's Wessie. Right there, we're crossing that, and we are now on the localizer. And you know we're on the localizer because we have this green display that is now around that selected course that you saw a few moments ago. The highway display says this. Also, if you go up here, you'll notice the localizer is, of course, the mode that we've got grabbed. And, of course, you swing over to here, you can see glide slope is flashing to notify us. So what we need to do is we need to prepare this aircraft for a landing. It's a Cessna 172 doing an ILS approach. It's not bad. I mean, we got ice. I expected that today. So I'm going to go ahead and slow down to less than 110 knots. The reason we're going less than 110, in case you're curious, apparently we have some ice inside here, which is always kind of fun. As you can see, we're in the blue here, so if I can do one click there, I call that the IFR flaps for this particular aircraft. Now, as we descend, we're going to get ready for our missed approach in case something does not go right. So let's go ahead and grab our little plan again one more time, and we can see the missed approach procedure is going to be a right turn. We can see that pretty clearly here. Let's see here. We're going to climb to 1300, and then we're going to go up to 1300, then we're going to execute a right turn to 4000, and we're going to proceed direct CTR Chester, which is 115.1. So let's go ahead and get that all ready, just in case something goes wrong on our approach here. So I'm going to come up to here. I'll dial this one to 115.1. 115.1, just so it's ready to go. Remember, we're proceeding direct, so that makes it pretty easy. One of the really cool tricks you can do here is you can actually tell it to lock on to that, but I'm not going to do that just yet, because you'll see this whole needle swing when it comes time to actually do the missed approach, if we are going to choose to go missed approach. Next thing we need to do is we need to select our altitude of the missed approach. Our altitude for the missed approach, as you saw, is going to be 1300, and then it's going to be 4000. Just for safety, I'm going to just crank this thing up right up to 4000, just like that. Again, this is all standard workflow. This is what we would normally do in a flight. Looking out the window, coming in fine. Our airspeed is perfect. You'll notice all I had to do is put a notch of flaps down and kind of forget the rest of the handles. Usually 1800 and flaps 10 is plenty for a Cessna 172. Again, depends on your weight, depends on the wind. We have a crosswind of the gods here. 14 knots. Not bad. And all we're going to do is enjoy the ride all the way down onto the ground. So one of the tough parts here is when you're doing a 172 and you're doing an IFR approach, you always have to remember that you have to make that transition to the rest of your flaps. Given the conditions and given the length of the runway, I'm just going to go right to flaps 20 here. I'm not going to do any more than that. But one of the things that makes this a lot easier is you got that little circle with the wings on it. That kind of tells you exactly what you're going to crash into. You just got to line that up at the middle of your green box there, and it makes it much easier to kind of line yourself up. You can see we're getting a little slow. I can even pull my nose up. The flight director still works here. Very nice. It's about perfect right there, actually. About 60, between 60 65 and a 172 is fine. I remember when I was learning to fly, I was learning on a Cessna 172K. That thing is not the same thing as this. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and transition. We're going to get that right wing down. And we're just going to transition into a nice little land. Whoa, a little bit of wind. Nothing too terrible here. Yeah, a little bit of right wing, a little bit of right wing. That's not too bad. Ooh, whoa, that is quite the crosswind. Nice. And we're now safely on the ground. I don't need the seizure lines there, but thank you anyway, Flight Sim. And as you can see, that's a really, really effective flight. Very little of the work on our part was about flying the plane, except for the very, very beginning, the end. Really, a lot of it was just getting everything set up in such a way we can use it. Now, the cool thing here is I can come in here and zoom way, way, way in, and you can actually see exactly where we are on the ground. Now, in the real one, you can actually like read off the signs and stuff like that. But what they did for this is they basically created like an overhead view, and they're like interpolating the overhead view and everything like that. But of course, what you would do in the real world is you go right over that line like that. You'd hold the brakes. You call them and say taxi to the restaurant, or you'd say taxi to Tobico if you're one of those people. Restaurant's this building right over here, by the way. And of course, you'd head over there. And then, of course, because everything is all set here with our taxiway diagram, it just makes it so darn easy. Enjoy.